Be Your Best You, the Passionate to Purpose podcast with David Delaney. Good morning and very welcome yet again to another episode of Be Your Best You. And I am uber excited this morning because not only is it a very interesting, exciting, wonderfully jam-packed episode, I am co-hosting this morning, and my excitement co-hosting means that I am obviously not on my own, talking to myself, doing the introductions, which is fantastic, but I am joined from Canada this morning by the wonderful Dr. Rohini Bannerjee. Rohini, good morning.
Good morning to you. Good afternoon for you in Ireland. It's 9 o'clock here in Halifax, Canada, and I am delighted to be able to work on this particular project with you and to get to co-host and practice a little bit in front of the microphone.
Of course, because you have your own podcast coming up.
We're working on it. We are, and we're excited about those future conversations.
Excellent, excellent. And you joined us this morning, I suppose, really with a particular interest around, I know we were talking offline about cultures and how important and the influence, and a huge conversation outside of this. And so you, I suppose, got this particular episode going. So if you want to maybe tell us why very quickly before we bring in our guest this morning.
Sure. Culture, I think, is fluid, and it takes up a lot of our time when we sit and analyze it. But sometimes we have to just live culture. And I think our guest today is somebody who shows us ways, in creative ways and exciting ways and tangible ways, on how to live culture. And I've been in awe of his work and had the opportunity to meet him in Dublin in February of 2020 before everything locked down. So I'm delighted that we get to see an action-packed person, spirit, energy, who lives culture every day.
Okay, and our guest this morning is, of course, the inimitable John Connors. So you've met John. You have a head start.
Yeah, and I was mesmerized from the moment I met him. And he exudes such love of self and love of work and love of culture and love of his family. He lives and breathes art, and he talks in this episode about how important it is to acknowledge pain and trauma, and how creativity and art, and particularly acting and screenwriting, can bring us closer to healing and reconciliation. I think this is going to be a really exciting opportunity for our listeners to enjoy the arts in a real tangible way and really feel the spirit of John.
Okay, so it leads us right to the moment where we introduce our guest this morning, Mr. John Connors. John Connors, you are very welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. And we're joined also today by Rohini Bannerjee, who is joining us from Canada. Rohini, you're very welcome also as co-host.
Thank you, David.
No problem at all. John, let's get straight to it. Words have power. Okay, it's something that you've been quoted as saying. You're known in Ireland for the work you've done in film. People will know you from Love, Hate, Cardboard Gangsters. Most recently, I watched Breathe, for example, today. A lot of the film work that you do, and something that struck me from looking into some of the work you've done is the phrase that words have power. Can you tell us a bit about that and what that means for you?
Well, that can be interpreted in many different ways. Particularly in today's climate. I suppose, let me take it back to me grandmother, Chrissy Donoghue Ward. Donoghue was her maiden name. And the first kind of wave of traveller activists were Donoghues, and particularly were women. Well, predominantly women. 90% of our activists have been women. And her and her sister, Nan Donoghue Joyce, could not read or write. And they grew up in an era which they were rejected from schools, were not allowed to even be educated. I grew up in an era where I was still actually segregated in schools, and I'm only 31. But somehow they managed to bring forward travellers' rights more than anybody got sites built, got lots of different stuff in terms of education and legislation passed, and did all the groundwork for ethnicity that would happen decades later through the power of their words. And if you look at my community and you look at what's important to us and what is, and it's a very Irish thing, but I'd say, look, a lot of things, because we're going to talk probably a lot about Travers here, I'd say a lot of the things that I talk about with Travers are just, it's all Irish stuff. It's all Irish culture, but it's amplified within Travers, because for a long time we had a vehicle called nomadism that was able to protect the old Irish customs and way of life and that. And I suppose a cornerstone of Irish culture is storytelling, the old shanachis and that. And that's what my grandmother was and is, and her sister Nan Donoghue Joyce, who's passed away. That's what they did. They told stories, and they were both powerful orators. So they inspired a whole generation of travelers. Like if you go now, and even if you do social studies in college, you'll have to study them in modules. And they've inspired a generation of traveler activists who really look up to them. And it was all from the power of their words and how they spoke and the conviction and how they spoke. And then you can broaden it out in a different sense. Like I'm an actor today because of my grandmother, my grandfather, and hearing the stories that they would tell of the road, of the cultural stuff that happened, stuff going back hundreds of years, their history of Ireland that was oral and passed down, stuff that was not studied. And the power of her words and my grandfather's words conjured up so many images in my head. And it was like, going to the cinema, that's what it was like. And I would beg my mother, could I stay up late, and at the risk of waking up late for school, just so I could hear me granny speak, because her words were so powerful. Again, my grandfather, the exact same. And it's the reason why I'm an actor today. I think it's the reason why I'm a decent speaker today. I definitely got it in the DNA way, and also my environment. I got it in kind of both directions. And I think words have serious power. They have power to change. You can create change with words, and you can find purpose, And like for me, that was acting, that was art, that was creativity. And I suppose I've been armored with the kind of gift that I gab a bit. So, and again, words can destroy people as well, and they can have detrimental effects, and the way you use them. So look at fucking Hitler. You know what I mean? Hitler was famously one of the great orators of the world, and look what he was able to do. He was able to brainwash a whole country and demonize a whole people. So words hold power.
Okay. It's recently enough, John, that recognition of the traveler minority. Okay, I don't like the word minority, but it's only 2017 that the recognition. Why did that take so long?
Wow, that's a big one to unpack. Let me try.
We have all night.
Let's start by saying that recognition is not legal, has no legal standing in any way. It was just a public gesture that did mean a lot. Unfortunately, it's faded away into the wind. We thought it would mean a lot more. We thought it would mean that for the first time, instead of trying to literally destroy our culture, that the Irish government would be forced then to create mechanisms in which it could preserve traveller culture, which is essentially, as I go back to the old Irish Gaelic culture. Ethnic status took so long because there was not the will there. There was not the will in government. It was very unpopular. To support travellers in any way is very unpopular, in particular in rural Ireland. It is why a week before ethnic status was announced, let's say, the members of the Irish government, elected officials, told traveller activist groups not to publicise it on social media and not to make too much of a big deal. The reason behind that was they didn't want to alert kind of the vote and constituencies in rural Ireland, in which if you want to be elected, you have to literally have some sort of anti-traveller stance. And that was absolutely amplified with the Peter Casey presidential election. With 6 days out, he decided to go after travellers, and he went from very bottom to second. I don't know where he got his advice from, because if I was advising him, I would have told him to go with that strategy about 6 weeks out, and he would have beaten Michael D. Higgins. Just look at the fact that he had the most number 2 votes. That's 6 days out. He didn't get to put his message out there quite enough. So there was never a will to do that. There was never a will to recognise travellers. And look, it's never going to be done legally now, really. So I suppose symbolically it meant something to us, but I mean, things have gotten even worse with traveller discrimination since. So really, what did it do? I know there's a lot of traveller activists out there in groups and organisations that like to profess it was the greatest thing that ever happened to us. And it was a way in which they were allowed to relax and chill, you know, because they felt like they achieved something. Unfortunately, I'm not really with them in that one. I don't believe it's really, I don't think it means anything now. I mean, do you ever hear the saying that it's not worth the paper it's printed on? Well, ours wasn't even printed on a paper. You know what I mean? So you kind of wonder now what it fucking really means. And is it even worth pursuing the legalization of that and what that would mean? But the reality is we don't have enough power as a people. We don't have the population to have real weight. We're not politically aware enough, and there's a sort of defeatist mentality within travellers. I can tell you now anyway, for the vast majority of travellers, it meant shit anyway. Most of them wouldn't have even known what fucking ethnic status meant. It's really just the academic political class that would have really wanted it more than anything. But again, it just goes back, there was never the will. I mean, if you take it back to, let's go back to 1963 and the report on itinerancy, because remember, we were called itinerants back then. This was 18 years after Nazi Germany. And Charlie Hoy, who would later become our Taoiseach, led that committee. And it was the report on itinerancy. And he's quoted in the report as saying he was looking for the final solution to the itinerant problem. The exact same words used by Adolf Hitler against the Jews. And in that report, he consulted absolutely everybody from government ministers, elected TDs and councillors and what have you, to regular Joe Schopes in the Irish public, except travellers, even those who report on travellers, or Minker, which is really what we are. And in that, some people suggested, and elected officials, to put all travellers on Spike Island and let them breed out, or castrate the men, sterilise the women, take their children away from them so there's one less itinerant in the itinerant class. And that's the sort of thing that happened in 1963, and that's the sort of culture that was created. Now, that was a culmination of many different policies and acts that were brought in previous decades. But that was, again, seen as the final solution. So then we see the ramifications of that in the next decade or so. But I suppose where our governments our successive governments got lucky was in the invention of plastic for kind of home kind of improvement stuff for buckets and that and this, that, and the other. Plastic essentially overnight ruined the tinsmith trade. So you took away a trade that maybe 80% of travellers were employed were tinsmiths, and that was where they made their money. So our government saw that as an opportunity, and what they did was they offered the travellers social welfare for the first time, because travellers were not allowed to be on a social welfare list. But there was a stag. They all had to move to Dublin because travellers were traditionally just rural people, and you had to be settled for 18 months in Dublin in order to get social welfare. So it was a way of settling travellers. Now, they sent councillors over across to Holland to check in with the officials over there and how they dealt with their native indigenous nomadic people. And what they told them was, the councillor, I read all this and did all the research for my 3-part series on travellers. It's called John Connor's The Travellers. We won an IFTA for it, and it was reviewed in History Ireland and got stellar reviews on that for its authenticity and what we unearthed, which was just ignored by historians and anthropologists. And essentially what they told them was, we dealt with them by segregating them, by putting a space between them and our settled people. They always were put on the outskirts of towns and cities and such. And what has happened, he said, was just absolute animosity and chaos between both communities, and the discrimination has gotten way worse. So whatever you do, Irish councillors, don't do what we did. And what did they do? They did exactly that. And they went to England looking for the same advice. And the local English officials said, we use the boulder technique. So we get all their old camping sites and we fill boulders up so they can't go in there. And so overnight they're homeless. And he did both of them, and eventually settled travellers and put them on the outskirts. So I grew up on the outskirts in Coolock. I was I was right on the outskirts of, don't worry, I was right on the outskirts of Coolock, and behind us was just fields and fields, and right in front of us was a concrete jungle. But there was always a space between us and settled people. And so when you went and met them in school, there was always that divide, and that was created very, very early on. So it's funny because I think one of the things that the reason why we've been dehumanized, like forget about the media coming after us, the government and all that stuff. The fact that we're white is a huge thing, because you see, even your average old Irish kind of soft liberal gets to say they're not racist because we're white. And they've been as bad as anybody from the right and left are basically treat travelers the exact same.
Can I jump in here? Because this is really interesting. First of all, I'm really interested. So all of this segregation and pulling kids away from their families, these are, colonial techniques that have been used in all spaces occupied illegally by Europeans. And I can say that in Canada, I'm actually, in Nova Scotia, which is unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are trying our best to return the land to the shared peoples that are the Indigenous people of Canada, or Turtle Island, all of North America. It's a challenge. And this month is actually National Indigenous History Month. And there are campaigns that are continuing on to remind those that Canadians or descendants of settlers or migrants and immigrants, peoples who are not Indigenous to this land, were part and parcel of the removal of children from their families. And so I see a lot of links between what has happened in the history of Canada, which, let's be honest, we didn't learn about in school. It was washed away as Europeans discovering North America. And I'm wondering, knowing that this has been repeated in lands other than Ireland, how do you see your positionality, your power now as a vocal Irish traveler actor in the fight against inequality in general in Ireland? And I mean, looking at your migrant populations, people of color who are now born in Ireland and identify as Irish, but don't look like yourself or David. How does your positionality and your interest in equality perhaps help those peoples?
Well, look, it goes back to the old cliche, there isn't equality unless everybody's equal. So, and then also it's good to have solidarity with other groups. And from day one of my activism, I've been involved in many different campaigns, including the homeless campaign in Ireland. The last decade, I've done as much as I can in that. The class warfare and other ethnic groups and immigrant stuff and refugee stuff have been involved in so much of that. It's about coming together, without a doubt. The ironic thing of the whole thing is that, look, Ireland as a country, we were, first of all, anyway, the Irish government used the exact same tactics that was used against them by the British Empire against us. Literally used the colonial handbook. That's a fact, right? And it was set up as a war of attrition so that we could eventually get a wise and kill each other. That's what's happening. That is the result of all that stuff. But the irony of the whole thing is that Ireland was the testing ground for empire, for Britain. And we, as a country, and I mean as an Irishman here, not just a traveller, we were terrorised and we're still colonised. Because until we're united, we're colonised. We're colonised up north. Now, I think the south is colonised by the EU, but that's a whole other thing. And there's all different stuff going on there. But that's what I feel, in a different way, in a more subverted way. So we know about colonialism. We know about horror. We know about all that stuff that came and how this country went through fucking hell. And essentially, when the Free State was formed and then the Catholic Church, I think they played a big part in even the traveller thing, in the sense that they created such repression among the Irish people and such fear that you almost want someone else that you can throw your shit on top of. And I genuinely believe that's a component of it, but it's a big, huge fucking thing. There's a lot of things to unpack with that, but absolutely coming together, everyone coming together and supporting each other, and also class. I need to talk about that, because this thing of like, yeah, it's great to talk about race and all these other things, but we're kind of talking about that now in Ireland. We're beginning to talk about that in Ireland, but we still have yet to talk about class, and that means any person of any color of that class right? Because if you look at like the way we went with certain gender quotas in Ireland, and like you look at the Screen Ireland, formerly the Film Board, the vast majority of people working out there now are women. What I said to their face when I met them, and many of those are working class. You know what I mean? And many of those are from an ethnic background. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
class is something we can't ignore. The last Irish sort of voice that talked about class was Brendan Behan. I mean, that's too long ago. And it's partly because we're a small little island that everybody knows each other. And all the sort of elite groups go to the same schools. It's the Black Rocks, it's the Belvederes, it's the St. Andrews, and then it's Trinity and blah, 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 and whatever. And lots of working class people go there as well, Trinity. And they've become more inclusive in the last decade or two. And fair play to them for that. But we're still ignoring that class. And here's the problem. When you ignore the working class people of any country, you create opportunities for bad people to radicalize those people. You know what I mean? To give them purpose. And we've seen it. We've seen it all across the world. So I think that's something that needs addressed in a big way in Ireland, this class, because we have one of the worst homeless crises in Europe. And if you just look at like the pyramid of happiness or contentment, it starts with a roof over your head. Absolutely. And if you can't provide a roof over your head for your people, well, then what's going to happen? What's next is going to happen? We've one of the highest rates of child homelessness in Ireland. And I think it all starts with the home, believe it or not. And then you have your vulture funds, you have all these buying up. Like, where are we ever going to get out of this? We have leaders who are the cowardliest leaders in the world, in my opinion. Like, I mean, it's like they literally don't care about Irish people. It seems every move is about that. It's about the property developers. It's about the vulture funds. It's about the EU, the unelected officials in the European Union. We don't elect the 5 whatever main positions. They still have to tell us what we can do with our country. All that stuff. There's so much going on in the country, and the problem is that there's a grinder on the Irish people and the working class people, in that they're fucking getting choked by the neck, and they haven't got the fucking energy. They haven't got the energy to even fight back. And the whole thing of the fighting Irish, that's gone. That's dead. You know what I mean? And it's why, look, I've been talking more about class issues as well, and other groups than just travellers, because we all should be getting together, you know, and even the middle classes, they're in the middle, you know, against the elite. You know what I mean? Because the middle classes want to get on and become bigger, and upper class, and the working class want to become middle class, and there's all this stuff going on. And it's just, it's a really fucking destructive mechanism we have in place right now in Ireland.
John, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A boxer.
Okay, but you were a boxer. You were boxing from a young age. So you wanted to go pro with it, or what? Yeah. The dream was to box. Yeah, it was always, since I watched, like, I got bullied a lot as a kid, so I had to just start boxing. And I made a list of all the bullies, and eventually I bet the shit out of every one of them. And I became one of the most successful amateurs in my club's history. I won the first All-Ireland, I think, in the club had in 5 years. I won 3 in a row. I was in 5 finals in a row, 4 nation gold medals, silver medal, multi-nation, represented Ireland. And that was all despite the fact that it was the point scoring system back then that suited the boxers, and I was a fighter style. So I was always thinking about going pro because my style suited that. And that was going to happen. Unfortunately, when I hit kind of mid to late teens, like 2 things happened. For starters, I started picking up a lot of injuries. And it's down to, if you're a big puncher, you get a lot of injuries. If you're a fast twitch person, you get a lot of injuries. So I was that type of person. So that coincided with a fucking bout of depression that hit me all of a sudden, because what isn't said becomes a symptom, and trauma comes to collect. And I ignored all the trauma that I suffered in my childhood, the bullying and my father, and suicide and all that stuff, and all the expectation and the cultural expectations. And I literally could not make the connection between my trauma and my behavior, my destructive behavior. So that was a big cauldron of just fucking chaos and violence and everything. And that resulted in me just being on the brink of suicide. And boxing was not enough to resurrect me. But acting resurrected me, because that was spiritual, essentially. That's what I think it is. Acting, art, creativity is actually spiritual to me. So that saved my life. Yeah, John, I've read that in the travel community, 82% of the the traveling community have been affected in some way, shape, or form by suicide, and the rate of suicide itself is something like 6 times higher.
6.5 times higher among women, 7 times among men. 11% of travellers die by suicide, making it the highest suicide rate in the world per capita of any people, including people in war-torn areas. So yeah, it's become a part of the culture, unfortunately, man. But you can easily look around the world and you look at the indigenous groups, particularly in North America, and you look at Australia, and you see indigenous people who have been displaced and their nomadism being taken away from them, i.e. identity. And any psychologist worth a grain of salt will tell you remove an identity from people and it has catastrophic ramifications. So that is what happened. And an inferiority complex well, we have it as an Irish people as a whole. We have an inferiority complex, and travellers kind of have it even more so. And it's because this removal of identity and feeling like they're not exactly a traveller. Like I remember watching that film, Geronimo, the life story of Geronimo, a great warrior. And I remember he got settled and he got put into reservations. And first it was a camp that was a military camp first, and later became a reservation. And I remember a young boy approached him and said, I want to be like you. I'm going to be a warrior. I'm going to be. And Geronimo was drunk, and Geronimo was acting the fucking cunt. And Geronimo said to him, you'll never be like me. You'll never be like us. You're not a real whatever, Comanche or whatever. And the kid goes and kills himself. And I was like, fuck me, what a fucking example for how destructive it can be for a human being to feel like they've lost their identity or they suddenly don't know who they are. And you see it in other groups with like LGBT people and that, of this thing of their identity and having to conceal it, and many other groups. And I think it's the most important thing, coming to terms with who you are and being proud of who you are, your identity. That was the struggle I went through too. And once I kind of came to the other side of that, even though now I've never it stopped my suicidal tendencies, but it never has cured my depression. I go through bouts of depression, but I know how to deal with it. And I think eradicated, that inner internalized hatred and shame that is prevalent in travellers today, particularly young travellers, and we have it in Ireland, I think, as well, in general. I think Irish people on the core were very proud, but really we're not. I really feel deep down we're not. I think we feel inferior. I think we feel inferior to the British. I think we feel inferior to the rest of the English-speaking world. I think there's that going on. And then travellers are the same. We're extra proud, but extra inferior too,
I have a question about identity. That's something that from the academic world, I talk about a lot. And I think it's interesting because for me, identity is fluid. So it's never stagnant. It has to change and it has to grow with the person. And I think that as we age and get more comfortable with ourselves and the multiple layers that we might present to the world, and also we might keep hidden, identity becomes stronger and more fierce. And I agree with you. I think a lot of the time that we create shame boundaries is because we don't know who we are. And so my question would be what is identity to you? Is it fluid? Do we have an opportunity to change our identity as we age? I mean, you're a little younger than me. You still have a lot of time to catch up on creating identity layers, perhaps, having more experiences, having interactions with people from across the world. I think that all brings part and parcel to your identity. So for me, identity is fluid, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I couldn't agree more. And let me give you an example of how I went through that process and discovered that. So when I did Love Hate was a TV show in Ireland that was a big hit, and the spotlight that was put on me was intense, the fame and all that. But I was asked to account for whatever traveller fault or crime or anything happened. I was the person that everybody fucking wanted to shit on, and all the media just wanted to ask me all traveller shit. They didn't even regard me as an actor. While they were asking all the other actors in the show, who do you want to work with in Hollywood and so on and blah, blah, blah. They were asking me to account for traveller, rural crime and stuff. So what happened was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was bred to be an activist. So just for me grandmother and everything. So I had this firepower and I went at them hard. And I went at them hard with culture as well. And I went at them hard with my identity, and I forced that identity out there. And it became the sort of boogeyman for them, and they hated me because I was being I was being the absolute most unapologetic traveler, flaws and all that you could get. And some people hated me for that. In fact, a lot of people hated me for that. And I fell into the trap of allowing that to be the only thing that you need to know about me is the fact that I'm a traveler. And that became my own unconscious bias within myself. And I had to deconstruct that in my 20s, particularly getting into my late 20s. And where I'm at with that now is that me being a traveler is very, very important to me. Where I came from, my history, the people that came before me, the survivors, because we are a survival race of people. That's what we are, or ethnic group, or whatever you want to call us. We're survivors. We're only here because we've survived colonialism, and we've survived state oppression from the Irish Free State government, successive governments. So that's all great. And there's components to my culture that I love, components I don't like. So now I disregard what I don't like. And then that traveler identity is one part of who I am. And then there's the creative John. And then there's the blackguard John. Then there's the messer John. Then there's the fucking have the crack with the lads John. Then there's the open-minded John. You know what I mean? And then there's the John who stands up and fights for what he believes in, no matter what it is. So I don't allow it to be the absolute embodiment of me anymore. I take the best of it, and I'll never deny who I am. Fight for me, people, to the day I die in my deathbed. But it isn't me as a whole. I'm much more than just John the Traveler. So I totally agree. And just experiences I've had mind-blowing experiences in my life. Like that you just hear these moments that you just change. I remember not even change, but this level of awareness. I remember doing a documentary on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota with the Lakota people. And I met this chief named Milo Yellowhair. And he was in Ireland in the 1970s. And he was actually with the Dubliners, the band. And they were protesting against the nuclear. They were going to bring nuclear weaponry to Ireland and all this kind of stuff that was going to happen. And they were protesting all that. And he was a part of the American Indian movement. And he saw a bunch of travelers on the street in Wexford. Now, Wexford is where the Connorses come from, my people as well. So they were probably Connorses. And he asked Luke Kelly, about who are those people? They look a bit different. He just sensed it. And he said, you know them, they're essentially what you are over in America. That's what he said. So when I met him, he came over to me immediately, shook my hand and gave me a hug. And he said, Sunday, I'm gonna set up a sweat lodge for you. And I want you to come to it. Just for you. It's in your honor. And I went and did it. And he brought me around the reservation the whole week, and I interviewed people left, right, and center. But I avoided interviewing him. I said, I'm going to interview him on the cuff when he doesn't know, when I got to know enough about him, you know? So that Sunday, we were nearly ready for the sweat lodge, but the camera wasn't allowed to record any of that. But we were just about ready to start. The camera was still going. And I had downloaded a bit of information on Milo already. And I pulled him and I said, Milo, tell me a bit about your experience in the American Indian movement and how Bobby Sands, one of the 1981 hunger strikers, inspired you. And he busted out crying. And he said, when we saw what Bobby Sands done and those other hunger strikers, that resonated with us. And we felt we weren't doing enough. And we had to stand up. And that was a big moment for the American Indian movement. And he started crying. And I said, right, switch off the camera. We got enough. We'll go into the sweat lodge. And I got put the furthest away from the door. Now in the sweat lodge, they bury a hole and they bring in all these rocks that have been burning from dawn, and now it's dusk, and you sprinkle stuff on it, herbs and other stuff and water and all that kind of thing. And before I went in, he says, John, just to warn you, he said, you're going to experience the two biggest fears for the white man. And I said, what? Fire and darkness, right? So I went in and there was the furthest away from the door, and they shut over the door and they started chanting and stuff. And I got the worst panic attack of my life. And I went, oh my God. And I don't know if it's because he said that to me or it was going to happen anyway, but it was the worst of my life. And in order to get out, I would have had to make a big deal out of it. And I was the furthest away from, I would have had to jump over people and all this. And in that moment, I said, fuck it. I'd rather die because I was so embarrassed to leave. And when I decided to rather die, the panic attack subsided. And I just laid down and I listened to the chant. And we were in there for 2 hours. And I came out and everybody went into the cabin to get stew. But it was torrential rain hit and I was just wearing a pair of shorts. And I walked out to this field with loads of crops. Beauty like you've never seen. And in the distance, I could see a twister and I could hear coyotes. And it was like that moment of when Tim Robbins came out of Shawshank Redemption through the pipe and he went like that. Yeah. And I did that and I went, fuck me. And I said to myself, think of this moment, take it all in, take it all in. This is your happy place. That is your happy place. And that just opened up my whole world and my mental health and how to deal with it, you know? So these experiences you accumulate change you as a person, which is why I totally agree with you that identity is fluid, because if your mentality changes, your identity changes, because it's the lens in which you look through things and how you look at people and other people. But I think having that open mind to fucking experience, if you just have a fucking open mind to experience, fuck me, you will learn so much about life, you know? Yep. So I'm in agreement.
I'm loving how you're describing things there, the experience in the sweat room. We're talking about words having power and your images have power. And that I want to talk to creative John. Okay. Yeah. And tell me a bit about the creative process for you. I mean, okay, you mentioned Love Hate there and the work you've done, and like there's loads of other stuff you've done. Breathe, for example. Tell me about Breathe.
So what happened with Breathe was I did a project right before that. I'm not going to name the project, but it was a feature film and it was done on an ultra low budget. But there was a role in it for me that was very different than anything I've ever done. A fellow who was on the spectrum, Asperger's, he was an accountant, he was middle class, and he had no life experience whatsoever and no friends. And I said yes to doing that project just to do something different. And what happened was I came off working with Jim Sheridan, a 6-time Oscar nominee, and I go on to this set and everything is falling around and I'm trying to fix everything because I have a lot of experience. And a part of it, I suppose, is ego as well. But I wanted the thing to be good. So about 5-6 days in, I came to the realization that I'd wasted 5 or 6 days trying to fix everything around me and that my performance suffered as a result of that, which fucking really nearly, killed me when I realized I let it slip big time. So I tried my best for the rest of the film, but the result is a very mediocre performance at best. So I'd say about a month after that, I got an email from Maureen Hughes. She's probably the best casting director in Ireland. She said, John, look, I know you don't want to do Traveller stuff, but I got this short film and I think you should really look at it. And I said, no, Maureen, I don't want to do it. Look, if it's not written by a traveller, I'm not doing it, blah, blah, blah. And I want to write my own, blah, blah. I said, John, I really have to insist that you just read this fucking short, you know? So I said, okay, I'll read the short. So I read the short and I recognized what it was inspired by. It was inspired by a documentary called Gypsy something in England, Gypsy Blood. Some of the components he took from it. And the writer was actually a Greek English fella. And I believe anybody can write anything, really. It's just that everything so far has been written by settled people from their lens and whatever. But this fella had a fresh look at it. And it was focused on a bare knuckle, tough fighting traveller man who had a son that he thought was gay. And the lengths in which he went to in order to avoid that, and then being put with the ultimate choice. And again, it comes down to identity. How much do you really love your child? How much are you willing to ignore? How much are you willing to embrace? So those questions were profound to me. And I knew someone who was close to me who was gay and who got married anyway, and I told him not to. And I thought of him, and I thought, I'm going to do this film for him. And that was my inspiration. So I met with the writer, and the story was powerful, but the dialogue was terrible, atrocious, because he didn't know how to write traveller dialogue. So I made an agreement with him. I said, if you let me rewrite some of the dialogue and basically improvise most of the film, I'll do it. So they said, okay, let's do it. And with that film, that was like a revenge for the previous film, in which I totally learned a lesson to serve the character. That's it. Nothing else around you. If all hell is breaking loose, you focus on the character. What do they want? How do they get it? What do they need? Which is different, because your wants are driven by your ego. Your needs are obviously a necessity. And the simple questions. That's it. Simple, simple, simple. When you're lost, get back to that. And we did that film. And it was one of my better performances, probably my best in a way, even though it was only a short film. And that traveled all around the world. and did great and won many festivals. And I was getting texts from people in Qatar and in United Arab Emirates and in Iran, gay men who were texting me, thanking me for that. And that was like I needed that at that time, because I needed to be reminded the power of art and creativity and the power it has to affect people in a positive way, and encourage people, and you know, that thing of like speaking to people, like when you see a film, sometimes a piece of theater, a song that you feel like was written for you, or you were meant to watch it, or it's a bit of serendipity. Like, let me give you a most recent example. So this is crazy. This only happened today. Like, and serendipity, fuck me, it always takes over my life. But this is not exactly me, but it is in a way. So there's a big, huge project coming up that I'm involved in. It's a theatre project, and it's the first traveller writer ever in the Abbey Theatre. And it's a fucking great play. I'm doing it, and there's a role of a girl who was engaged to a boy, but the night, 2 nights before the wedding, she comes out as gay to her mother. Now, I know this young traveller girl who's 17, 18, the same age as the character, who's engaged to a boy, and she's a great actor, and I suggested her for the role. I said, please try her. So I sent it to her, and her father rings me back, and he said, she's just come out as gay, and she's just gotten rid of her fiance. Like, what serendipity? And to them, it was like a spiritual thing, like it was a sign that they were on the right road. So there's a weird kind of serendipity, synchronicity that surrounds the arts that is fucking, I don't even want to know what it is, but it is something. And it's that spirituality, and it's,
I feel like I've recently been blessed with this because David gifted me The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and that's a text that you need to take a look at if you haven't.
I've been told. Yeah.
I think you would soak it up in a minute. You would love some of the tasks that she asks you to do. But David sent it to me here in Canada, and I've been passing it on to other friends. And with that, she talks openly about synchronicity and the fact that as you become more creative and your heart opens, you're more open to creativity and creative space and creative people and energy and spirit. I want to go back to one thing that you said that I thought was really interesting. You said you give yourself to the character, or when you're looking at characters and how they present themselves and why Breathe was so important, you wanted to make sure the character was on point. You were willing to change dialogue and then pursue the project. How do you stay true to yourself? I mean, are we characters? Are we personalities? Are we acting? Are we living? How do you stay true to yourself? Because when you're an actor, when you're a creative person, at least for me, it's through writing. I sometimes have the academic voice, a creative voice, and then just the normal me voice. Do I separate them? Do I keep them all together? How do I nurture all of them? But my big question for you is, how do you stay true to yourself? I mean, you're so passionate about your characters, but what about you?
I don't stay true to myself. Jesus, I've just worked on myself for years and know who I am at this point. But also, that's very important to know who you are. And I mean that on the deepest of level. I mean, you need to know what's in the well, what's in your well, what's in your arsenal. You need to know. You need to become very, very comfortable and very aware of your shadow and the absolute destructive side of you. Because there's a Hitler, there's a Stalin, there's a Mother Teresa, there's a Gandhi, there's a Malcolm X, there's a Martin Luther King in all of us. I genuinely believe that. And you can't convincingly do anything in a character that is not you. You can't fake it. If someone is there and they're giving you a compelling performance with one thing that's coming out of them or another, one emotion, one component to them, do you have that inside them? You don't fake that shit. That's inside the well. You know what I mean? So a lot of actors, there's different philosophies around it. A lot of actors, they like to run away from themselves in characters. And I do the opposite. I like to run into the character. And I like to go, what's inside me I can put in there? And that, because I know I can connect to that shit fucking easy. I don't want to fake it ever. I don't want to fake it. I want this to be fucking, I want it to go as smooth as possible. I wouldn't, if I if I wasn't capable of a role, I'd just say, even if I was 10, I'd say no. I'd know what I'm capable of, what I'm not. You know what I mean? So for me, it's about bringing yourself into the fucking character. Make this thing come alive. Make it come alive off the page, you know? And it's as simple as that, and just try to have integrity in what you do. Like, but I mean, a lot of it's down to who you work with and what you're allowed. And like in film, it's the director's medium, so you have to respect the director and just hope that you get a director that's open-minded, that allows you to have your say. And you have to kind of create the character together with the director, because sometimes you could arrive on set and you have your own ideas, and he or she has very different ideas. You know what I mean? So I think it's important that in pre-production you figure out those things. I think a bit of rehearsal is always good. I love rehearsing. I love it because I feel like I've sometimes just stumbled upon the character on day 3 of shoot, you know. And when I've done rehearsals for a shoot, you stumble across the character in rehearsals. You know what I mean? And then by the time you get on set, you know the character. And I think that's important. For me, I like doing rehearsals. When I just directed my own film, which I'm in the edit for now, we did like a week's rehearsal, and it was fucking invaluable for me as a director, seeing what the actors were bringing at it, seeing their own personal psychology, looking at the characters. And they brought so much depth and read into the lines in different ways than I did, which informed how I directed them on the day, or even how I didn't direct them, how I just stepped back instead of fuck out of their space and let them fly because they own the characters, you know?
So, what are you reading lately? What's by your bedside or in the back of your car or wherever
I
you
was just given, it's probably around there somewhere. I was just given the Robert Greene book, 48 Laws.
Okay.
So I'm halfway through that. The 48 Laws for Life, and like Machiavellian type of things, and things that help in business and arts and everything. It's basic psychology. I'm fascinated with psychology, with human behavior, and how our psychology affects our behavior, how our traumas affect our behavior. All that stuff is the world that I've an endless kind of appetite for. I think anything I watch on YouTube is related to that. Yeah, and I live with a psychotherapist and a cognitive scientist, so and we're business partners, and I know him 8 years. So he's helped me a lot with stuff. He's helped me figure out a lot of stuff in my own life, and yeah, he helps feed my endless appetite for psychology. Basically.
Excellent. John, tell us what's next. Film, shorts, what's next in the pipeline for you?
Well, I have 3 films that are coming. One is out actually on Broken Law on Netflix. There's another Bend in the River that's being released online and various different platforms. And then Black Medicine, the same, Sky, VOD, all that. Obviously, cinema got hit because of all that reasons. And then The Black Wealth, which I co-wrote with Tiernan, I directed. It's with my company, Clusterfox. We met it under level 5 lockdown on a micro budget, and it was a film that I was told would never be funded, and I was told by the funding bodies to not even send it in officially because of the themes, and it's about the generational impact of clerical abuse and how we inherit trauma, and it puts Ireland's institutions on trial in a way, but not in a preachy way, in a very organic way, driven by the characters. The Black Wealth were a group of people in ancient Rome that wanted to uphold the power of the Pope. They were Pope loyalists, and anybody who went against them, including the great writer Virgil, who wrote Dante's Inferno, and we kind of loosely do a modern day tale version of that in an urban setting. They either got banished, massacred, murdered, or whatever. Pretty bad people. So essentially what we're saying, the state of Ireland, not the people, is the Black Wealth. And we have the institutionalized representations of the Black Wealth in the film. And because the state of Ireland chose to protect the power of its institutions over the interests of the people. And we're still seeing the results of that today. We're still seeing the results of people who went through industrial schools, Magdalenages, their kids, how they behaved with their kids, reared the kids, abandoned their kids, and how they just inherited trauma in one way or another. So we're exploring that in the Black Wealth. So that's next. We're in the edit for that now. And then I've 3 films that with our company that got Slate funded with Screen Ireland. One is called Concrete Crayons, which I'm acted in. Tiernan wrote and is directed, and that's kind of a Stand By Me set in Dublin, working class area, really powerful script. Then we have another one called Tiger, which is set during the Celtic Tiger, the big economic boom in Ireland, but is centered around joyriding and the culture of the 90s in Ireland. But again, it's about family and trauma and all that kind of stuff in a different way. And then the final one is The Keepers of the Flame, which I wrote. I'm going to direct, which is going to be the first traveller film ever with a traveller behind it. And it's set in the traveller community. But really what it's about is the Gaelic flame of Ireland and the eradication of Irish culture, and how globalization and modernization play a part in that. So in a political sense, it's what it's about. Internally, again, it's about overcoming trauma and grief and the power of family coming together in order to do that.
Excellent. John, we're coming on time. I could talk to you all evening. I just want to say thanks to Rohini for co-hosting, joining us on this episode. We often say words have power. John, you have some powerful words. I just want to say thank you very much for sharing them with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening as well.
Thank you.
And that's it for another week. Thanks for joining us this morning, and do join us next time on Be Your Best You. Have a good week.